Hello, Econ scholars. Mr. Carlson coming at you here. Sorry that I could not be with you guys today, but I fully have trust in you that you guys are going to do just fine without me. Um, if your fourth hour, Mr. Pierce was not here either. For sixth hour, if this is sixth hour, Mr. Pierce was obviously here to help out with any questions or comments or concerns. So I'm still going to go through the PowerPoint and notes, dealing with that intro to Econ PowerPoint notes. And I'm going to show you guys that here, go through that PowerPoint with you. It's in classwork. So if you can hop on the Google Classroom page here, it'll be up in here. So once you get going in there, it'll be called Econ or Intro to Econ PowerPoint and Notes. My suggestion would be, as you can see, it's not due anytime, but there are often times in class, as many of you know, that will give an open note or open homework quiz. And if you've got all this stuff filled out, that open note quiz, open homework quiz, whatever you want to call it, is going to be really, really easy for you. It'll be easy points to help boost your grade. If you don't have this stuff filled out and haven't paid attention and follow along, you may be doomed on those open note, open homework quizzes. Also, my suggestion is I'm going through here. Don't go ahead. You could very easily get ahead, but then you're just going to sit here and have nothing to do. Plus, I'm going to talk about a few of these things that I think it's important that you listen to a little more carefully so I can explain it further. So again, pay attention. Here we go. I'm going to go through these. If I'm going too fast, it's okay. Just keep up as much as you can. You'll have time. Then you can go back to the, in fact, here, I'll just go to an hour because I haven't loaded up yet. It'll be loaded for you though. You'll have time to go back through these. So it's right here. It's titled Intro to Econ PowerPoint Notes. There you go. It's posted there for you. Again, it's nothing you have to turn in. It's not due anytime, but it will be something that you're going to want to have for the future as we move forward. So get that popped open here. I'll give you about 30 seconds to do that. When you open it up, it should look just like this. All right. So what is economics? Hey, economics, we oftentimes think about economics as just dealing with money and business and stuff like that, which it is. It's a lot of that. But it's also really, it's the study of incentives. Okay. And incentives are this: something that incites or tends to incite to action or greater effort as a reward offered for increased productivity. That sounds like a lot. Really, an incentive, you guys know what an incentive is. Like when you incentivize someone to do something, you're trying to get them to do something by giving them a reward or a punishment. That's an incentive. Everything that you do in your life, if you think about it, has an incentive. So you had an incentive to come to school today. Maybe it's just because you know you're going to get a better education. Boom, there's your incentive. If you brushed your teeth this morning, the incentive was so that you don't get cavities. There's always an incentive in everything that we decide to do. And there are three different types of incentives that we'll talk about throughout the year. It's social, economic, and moral. Social, economic, and moral. So if you're kind of getting into this economic stuff and you want to talk about it just being incentives, there's a book out called Freakonomics, and I pulled a few kind of examples of how incentives do work from that book. The first one, so I'm going to read through it and then I'm going to talk about it a little bit. It says some cheating, because oftentimes due to incentives, people tend to cheat. So some cheating leaves barely a shadow of evidence. In other cases, the evidence is massive. Consider what happened one spring evening at midnight in 1987. 7 million children, American children, suddenly disappeared, like up in smoke. They were gone. 7 million. Come on, like that can't happen. We couldn't just lose 7 million people. So it says the worst kidnapping wave in history, like were 7 million kids kidnapped and taken away? It says hardly. It was the night of April 15. And when we talk about taxes later this year, and many of you may know this already, that every single year, if you've got a legal job where you're actually getting a paycheck and things like that, you have to file your taxes with the government, the federal government, and that's through the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service. Again, something else we'll talk about later this semester. And your deadline to get that done is April 15. So back in 1987, April 15, when people finally get all their taxes turned in, bam, 7 million people, children, are gone. The IRS had just changed a rule. So instead of merely listing each dependent child, tax filers were now required to provide a social security number for each child. Again, so every year when I turn in my taxes to the IRS, like one of the first things it asks me, obviously all of my information, like my name, social security number, all that jazz. Then it says, like, how many dependents do you have? And a dependent is just that, someone that depends on whoever the person is turning in their tax forms. So I have 3 dependents, right? My 2 sons and my daughter. So I always put on their names like Peyton Carlson, Miles Carlson, Kirsten Carlson. I have to put those on there. And the reason we do that, and the reason what we call claim dependence, is that our government doesn't take as much tax money from people for each child that they have, or from each dependent that we have. Now they do that so that if you have more kids, you get to keep more of your money, in hopes that people then have more money to provide their children with just the basic needs that they have, food, shelter, clothing, stuff like that. So there was obviously an incentive to have a lot of dependents. So people were putting on there, like, people like me, not that I would ever cheat. If I wanted to cheat the system so that I could keep more of my own money and not pay as many taxes, I could list on there, yeah, my 3 kids, Peyton, Miles, and Kirsten, but I might make up some names, like Billy Bob Joe Carlson, Stelma Themilovich Carlson, so that I would get to keep my own money. That's all I had to put on there, was like their names. Well, in 1987, the IRS finally decided that with each of those dependent names, a taxpayer also had to put in their social security number. Each one of us has a social security number, and that's kind of a basic number so that the government can recognize us. As you're getting older, I would suggest that you memorize your social security number. Like, don't write it down on a sheet of paper and keep it in your pocket, because then you might lose that, and then someone's going to pick up your social security number and kind of pretend that they can be you. You don't want that. That's what we call identity theft. But you want to know your social security number, because I use it all the time when I've got to fill out, I don't know, job applications, or fill out stuff for my bank account, or if I want to do some tax, whatever. Like, you need to use it a lot. So my suggestion, if you don't already have it memorized, maybe think about doing that. Okay, so 1987, we'll go back to that. The IRS said for each dependent you put on your 10W or your 1040 form, that's what it says on here. That's just the title of the form that taxpayers need to fill out. It's called a 1040. When people finally had to put their social security number of their dependents on there, they couldn't fake those. And so all the people that were cheating couldn't do that anymore. They couldn't put on there just made up names, because you can't just make up a social security number, because when the government would check that, they would realize the social security number wouldn't match up with that person's name. So all of a sudden it stopped people from filling out up to 7 million fake names. So there's an incentive that people were cheating with, right? People were cheating because they knew that there was the incentive that if they filled out more people's names as dependents, they wouldn't have to pay as much money in taxes. The next one says, what if blood donors had been offered an incentive of $50 or $500 or $5,000 to simply, you go to the blood bank and you stick a needle in your arm and they pump out like a pint of blood. But something else would have changed dramatically as well. For every incentive has its dark side. Like we just talked about, people cheat because of incentives. If a pint of blood were worth $5,000, you can be sure that plenty of people would take note. Like people would be like, whoa, $5,000 just to give a pint of blood. I'm all over it. At $50, that's still a lot of money. People are like, I might, drive down the road to wherever the blood bank was and give the $50, but maybe they won't. I don't know if $50 is worth their time. They got to fill up with gas maybe to go do it. $500, people will probably be like, yeah, I can find some time to do it. And for $5,000, absolutely, people are going to start giving blood, which If you know anything about giving blood, you can only do it like once a day or once every other day because it makes you lightheaded and all that stuff. So if you are giving blood, you know what that's all about. So people would probably start to cheat. They might literally steal blood at knife point. Like they might pin you up in the corner in a dark alley and stick a needle in your arm and pump out your pint of blood and turn it in so they get $5,000. They might pass off pig blood. Maybe they go kill an animal and pump that blood out. There's a pint of blood and turn that in. We don't want that. Or they might like circumvent donation limits, meaning like I just said, usually you can only give like a pint of blood every couple of days. People might try to use fake IDs so they can do it more often to make $5,000 more. So the initial incentive of paying people to give blood, people might think that's a great idea to get more people to give blood, but people might try to take advantage of that and cheat and steal and lie. So incentives can sometimes cause bad things, even though there were good intentions behind it. Okay, so back on the notes, there's that blank there. Economics, the study. So it's how we study of how people use limited resources to produce and distribute goods and services and satisfy unlimited wants and needs. So on the face of this earth, we have limited resources. We've only got so much water. We've only got so much oil. We've only got so much natural gas. We've only got so much farmland. We've only got so many trees. Like our resources are limited. We don't have unlimited. The issue is then who is going to get that stuff? What are we going to make out of that stuff to help satisfy our basic wants and needs, which are unlimited though? I mean, think about it. We want a lot of stuff, but we can't have everything if we don't have unlimited amount of resources. So we have an issue. So the basic economic problem comes down to the fact that we've got unlimited wants. We want everything, yet we have limited resources. So we can't have everything. And when there's not enough of something, we call that it's a scarce item. So we have scarcity. That's our problem. From that, then societies or groups of people or communities, they got to decide then what they're going to produce, how they're going to produce it, and for whom are they going to produce it for. Even every company has that issue, right? Nike, they've got to figure out what they're going to produce: shoes, sweatshirts, basketballs. They produce all sorts of athletic gear. So what athletic gear are they going to produce? How are they going to produce it? And then for who are they going to produce it? And all businesses, all communities, all societies have to figure out those three questions. Now, to produce stuff, there are these four factors of production, and we've got to know what those four things are. So these four things that go into producing a product or a service. And remember, we have limited resources. We can't just make everything. The first factor of production is land, like literally the earth, natural resources, farmland, timber, wood, certain minerals, oil, water, air. You might even consider as limited to an extent. So one, we got to have land to produce things. Two, we've got to have labor, which is the human factor of production. We've got to have human beings able to make stuff. Now you might say, well, no, we can make robots that can make stuff. Well, who's making the robots? Oh, wait, robots can make robots. No, because then who's programming the robots? Like, you have to have humans at some point in the production process. The third factor of production is capital. And capital is anything that goes into or helps make more of something. So, lights go off. Sorry. There we go. So if I'm a farmer, I'm producing food. Let's just say I'm a corn farmer and then a bean farmer, right? For farming, you can't just produce corn every year. You got to crop rotate. My capital is the barns that I have to keep animals or to keep my equipment in there. The equipment, so like my combine or anything that I use to spray pesticides or fertilizers in my fields. The land that I own is part of my capital. Maybe the bank account that I've built up so I can pay for all this stuff. That's all capital because all those things go into producing more, and in my case, producing more corn and more beans. And the fourth factor of production is entrepreneurship. We got to have people with managerial ability that can manage a business and that are willing to take a risk of opening up a business and starting a business. So go back to me being a farmer, I'm the entrepreneur, right? I've taken a risk of buying land, buying all this equipment so I can produce corns and beans. We got to have entrepreneurs starting businesses to keep our economy pumping. All right, next, let's talk about our unlimited wants and needs. So, first of all, wants, something you would like to have. You don't need it to survive. That's why I got the picture of the original Nintendo there. Oh, yeah, look how simple that is. Man, I could beat my son in video games if we still went back to that because now I have to play him in like Madden football on the Xbox, and there are like 16 different buttons I got to push to do different things. It's too complicated. I just like the Nintendo there where I got like two buttons I got to push. Perfect. That would be a want. You don't need a Nintendo to survive. It just might make life more pleasurable for you. Then we also have needs. That's something you have to have. That's why there's that glass of water showing there. You got to have stuff to survive. And maybe it's different from person to person based on where people live. But maybe us living here in Zeeland, Michigan, you got to have water. You got to have food. You got to have shelter. You got to have clothing. Gosh, I'm looking out the window right now. It's like 8 degrees outside. You're not going to survive without clothing. Some people argued earlier that, oh, Mr. C, you got to have a cell phone to survive. Maybe 10 or 12 years ago, I would have said, no, you don't need a cell phone to survive. But maybe there's a legitimate argument for that. You don't maybe need one to survive, but shoot, life is probably a lot easier these days if you do have a cell phone to access communication, information, all that good stuff. Then goods. Okay, goods are objects, like tangible things. My cell phone right here is a good. I can touch it. Okay. That's something that we can touch. It's tangible. That helps satisfy people's wants. Then there are also services. Those are more activities or actions, things that one person does for somebody else that satisfies people's wants. So me teaching you guys is a service. A plumber, come over to your house and do some plumbing work. That's a service. Right now, snowplows out. That is a service. A dentist provides a service. And because we have unlimited wants, but yet limited resources, we don't have everything. Like there's not just an abundance of oil that we can keep pumping out of the earth for the rest of eternity. We have what we call scarcity, which is an issue. We can't have everything we want. Some things are what we call scarce, and some things are more scarce than others. A scarcity, an imbalance between unlimited wants and limited resources. And some things are more scarce than others. Like imagine us in this classroom here, where there are like 25 of us. If we all locked the door, we sat in here for 3 days with no food or drinks, and all of a sudden, Mrs. Knoth, our principal, by the way, if you didn't know, that's who that is. All of a sudden, after 3 days, she walks in and she just tosses like 100 pizzas in the room. We're all good. Like we got plenty of pizza. It's not very scarce. So we might quick go grab a slice or two, but then we're just going to sit down and we're just going to eat. We might be scarfing down the pizza, but we're okay. Like that wasn't very scarce because there's so much of it. So we weren't really willing to sacrifice much for it. Okay, rewind. We've been in my classroom for 3 days, locked in here, no food, water, drink, whatever. And all of a sudden, Mrs. Knoth comes in and sets in one pizza. Holy smokes, we're going to have a bloodbath. Like people are going to be punching each other and diving for it and ripping each other. Like there's going to be blood, sweat, and tears all over the place because that pizza was very, very scarce. We were willing to sacrifice a lot for it. And oftentimes our sacrifice for very scarce items is money, right? We got to pay a lot of money for something that's more scarce. So because of scarcity, we got to make choices. We got to make choices between, hey, are we going to use one product over another because one's more scarce than another? And then we get into the fact that every choice has costs and benefits. Okay, every choice we make has a cost and it has a benefit. All right, here's a quick video clip for you then.
Economics is based on scarcity, the kind of scarcity that wintering animals are faced with in their search for food enough to survive. Scarcity is not an all-or-nothing affair. It can be a function of time. For instance, grass, abundant in summer, is scarce in the winter. Scarcity can also be a function of geography. This bull elk has a whole valley to himself, so he does not need to compete with any other animals for food. In the arena of human economics, societal and individual values can play a dominant role in creating haves and have-nots. Let's look at how this works by examining one of the world's most important natural resources: oil. Oil is a critical component to the functioning of Western economies. One of the first things to notice about crude oil reserves is that their distribution is not uniform across the planet. There is very little oil in Western Europe and Japan. So geographic disparity creates scarcity in some areas. Haves and have-nots. But having crude oil is not enough. After it is extracted from the ground, the oil must undergo a highly technological refining process to result in a product such as gasoline. So crude oil may be abundant in a geographical region, but low or zero productivity in processing it can result in scarcity. When scarcity exists, rarely is the scarce commodity distributed equally among all peoples. Most oil, for example, is consumed by only a handful of Western and Eastern industrial nations. Nations that can pay for it. Scarcity of resources, or even the threat of it, can have dire consequences. In 1990, when Iraq invaded oil-rich Kuwait, threatening to create a shortage in the supply of oil, the Gulf War began. Many people died, and an environmental disaster ensued. Shortages, or scarcity, can bring about all manner of human misery and suffering. One of the most appalling situations unfolded in colonial America, where land resources were abundant, but laborers to work the land were in short supply. Initially, the first American settlers recruited poor European workers into indentured servitude to fill the labor shortage. Later, when that solution proved inadequate, black Africans were captured and forced into slavery. Controversy over slavery resulted in a bloody civil war with many deaths, and its repercussions are felt in the United States to this day.
Okay, the next key term that we're going to be talking about a ton this year in Econ is opportunity cost, and that's the value of any alternative you must give up when you make a choice. Every single choice you make has an opportunity cost. So whatever you chose not to do is your opportunity cost. For example, you guys are at school today. As you see on here, there's a picture of it at Zeeland West, actually. You could have not chosen to go to school and gone skiing. So it's school versus skiing. Or slept in and just slept all day. Or played video games or gone shopping or whatever. Could have done something else. Any of those something else's is your opportunity cost.
With scarcity at the basis of material economics, the key operating principle is opportunity cost. The principle of opportunity cost states that if you have more of one thing, you must have less of another. In the case of true abundance, opportunity cost diminishes or ceases to exist, and you can have it all. Let's look at how the principle of opportunity cost works on a variety of levels. Over the planet Earth, there is much land. But what to do with it? If we use it for a city, we cannot farm it. In the city, if we build skyscrapers, we exclude residential neighborhoods. On a global scale, there is great debate over the preservation of the world's rainforests. Should they be saved for wildlife, recreation, and the health of the planet? Or should they be cleared for agriculture and other human industrial purposes? These are choices that must be made. Land is finite. Forests are limited. And many of the Earth's resources can be used up. All of these facts must be considered when we make choices. Choices which, once made, prevent other possible choices from being fulfilled. Again, the principle of opportunity cost at work. Opportunity cost functions at all levels of business. If a company needs to distribute videotapes to customers, it can decide to invest in tape duplication machines and commit labor hours to the process. Alternately, it can take the work to another company which specializes in tape duplication and pay them to do the work. In the latter case, the company uses up more of its capital money resources, but less of its labor resources. At the consumer level, when faced with limited income, we cannot buy everything. If we decide to buy toys, we cannot have a telescope, or new shoes, or jewelry. Again, opportunity cost. Even how a person chooses to spend his or her time relates to opportunity cost. When we watch television, it is often exclusive of other activities, such as outdoor recreation. Such a choice, while not directly economic, has economic consequences. Our decision to purchase a television rather than sporting goods impacts both of those industries and the people in them.
Perfect. So opportunity costs. Again, anytime you make a decision or do something, there's an opportunity cost because you chose not to do something else. Okay, so lastly, the production possibilities curve. In all businesses or all societies need to figure this out. It's a graph showing the maximum combinations of goods and services that can be produced from a fixed amount of resources in a given period of time. So if there's maybe a small town and they've got stuff to make clothing and also the resources to produce food, they've got to decide how much of each they want to produce because they've only got X amount of resources. And again, those resources can produce food and clothing. So they've got to chart out if we make this much food, then we can only make this much clothing. And they got to figure out what best suits them. So if you look at that kind of graph with that curve on it, like they could produce 50 whatever of clothing. Sorry, this light keeps going out. But then they used all their resources for clothing and they can't produce any food. And they probably don't want to do that. Now, vice versa, they could produce all food, but then they won't have any clothing. And they don't want to eat naked when it's 20 degrees outside in Zeeland, Michigan. So they got to figure out kind of what's the happy medium for them, what best suits them. And so they figure out if we make, let's say, 20 carloads or truckloads of food, follow that chart there over to 20 along the bottom line, the x-axis, then you go up to where it hits the curve. So they make 20 truckloads of food, they can still make 40 truckloads of clothing. And maybe that's what they need. So they've got to figure that out. That's businesses do this all the time. They're trying to figure out, hey, if we're going to produce a couple different products, well, here's the amount of resources we have. We can produce both, but what's going to be best for our company? What's going to be best for our sales? What's going to be best for our customers? So it's important that we understand, and we'll get into that more, how to produce a production possibilities curve. And we'll study that a little bit when we get further on in the semester. So lastly, we go back to just an easy definition. Economics is really the study of people trying to get what they want. That's simple. Study of people trying to get what they want. How do we get what we want? And how scarce are those products? What do we got to pay for those products? How are we going to get those products? Who's going to make it for us? So there's a lot that goes into that, but it's simply how do we get what we want? It's like the Rolling Stone song, right? Because you can't always get what you want. You guys have heard that song, I hope. We'll play it sometime. But that's what it's all about. That's what Econ's all about. All right, so if you didn't pick up on some things from that PowerPoint and those notes, go back. It's posted online. It's posted on the Google Classroom site. And please fill those things in just in case there were to be some sort of open note, open homework quiz that you could use those on in the future. Okay. You can put that away, but head back to the Google Classroom site because there is your next assignment now. I'm going to show you the assignment, and then when I'm done talking about it, you can take an 8-minute break. Come back to class, get in your seat, and you need to be working on this individually at your desk. Okay, you can't go on the hallways. Don't be moving around the classroom. Just pop your earbuds in. If you want to use your cell phone to listen to your music on your cell phone, that's fine. But you need to be working on this assignment on your own. Okay, we want to know what you think, not what the people around you think. When you're all done, because you should have enough time to finish this up in class. When you're all done, get it turned in on Google Classroom, and then find something to do that's not distracting other people. Preferably work for another class, read. Okay, I'm pretty sure you all have choice reading for your English 9 class. All right, but it's free time, FREE, find reasonable educational entertainment. It's not time to start texting your friends and your parents or whoever, okay? Keep it at your seat, keep it quiet until the end of class. I'm going to quick show you the assignment, and then you can go take your 8-minute break. So it says solving problems using incentives. Incentives is how we solve problems. It always is. You've done it all the time. You probably just didn't know that you were doing it. It says solve 5 of the following scenarios using some sort of incentive. It may be a reward or a punishment. Explain on the back of this page, and on here you just scroll down, how the incentive will be successful in each scenario. Scenarios may be viewed on both the local and national scale. So you could talk about something maybe that it would help prevent locally or nationally. Be creative, it says, use your heads. So what you need to do is you need to pick out 5 of these 15 different scenarios. Pick out 5 of them. And there are 5 spots for you to fill out information about how you're going to use that incentive. So, for example, so you can't use this one. Let's go with, number 2, stopping underage drinking. So that's the one I'm going to use. So scenario number 2, stopping underage drinking is what I would fill out right there. The incentive that I'm going to use to help stop that is that if you get caught underage drinking, there will be a $10,000 fine. Now you might say, hey, we learned in first semester in civics that would be cruel and unusual punishment. That's breaking the 8th Amendment. I don't care. Okay, that's the one I'm going to try to implement. $10,000 fine, that's the incentive if you are caught underage drinking. Then I'm going to write down why it will work. So I'd put, I think this will work because the punishment is so severe that no one's going to want to break it. Like, that's way too severe. If you think about that, if you're tempted to underage drink and also you're like, man, if I get caught, I have to pay $10,000. So that's why I think it's going to work. Is it going to stop everybody from doing it? No, but I think it'll help out. Okay, so you can't use that example. So you got to go back again. Use 5 of these 15. Chart them here fully and completely. And if you're writing with your finger, make sure it's legible, and then get it turned in. Now this is going to be due on tomorrow, on Friday. So you got a 1-day turnaround. But that's why we're giving you plenty of time in class to get this thing taken care of. If you have any questions, email me, ask Mr. Piersma, ask the substitute teacher maybe for some help. But remember, it is due mañana on Friday. Hey, have a great rest of the day. Have a great 8-minute break. Quiet in the hallways, quiet in the hallways, quiet in the hallways. Get back in your seat and get working. Have a great rest of the day. I will see you guys on Friday.